Welcome to the LexisNexis Evolving IP podcast. Today's episode is called Avanci, Advancing Licensing. I'm Tim Pullman, and I'm joined by my co-host, Francesca Levois. Today, we are excited to welcome Kasim Alfalahi, the CEO and founder of Avanci, to our podcast series. It's a pleasure to have you in. Kasim, hello.
Tim and Francisca, thank you very much for inviting me.
Well, Kasim, it's a pleasure to have you here with us. We have plenty that we would like to ask you and to talk to you about. But before we get started with that, could you maybe give our listeners a little bit of a view about yourself, a little bit of information around your background and how you came to be the CEO and founder of Avanci?
Absolutely. My background is engineering and management. So I have kind of a business background, but also an engineering background. I started my first job at Ericsson in Sweden. I studied in Sweden. But at the time, I actually had a choice because I speak a few languages between either getting a job to work with sales of infrastructure equipment towards countries like Latin America or Middle East, or there was another posting. The title was Product Manager IPR. And I was intrigued by that. It was different. The more I learned about it, the more I really liked it. I was working with licensing. I worked a lot with explaining to our engineer how important is the development of the technology, and how important it is to protect our technology with IPs, and how can we license it to the market so other companies can use the technology we've developed and give us a return on investment so we can continue investing in new technology. At the time when I started in Ericsson, we were, believe it or not, we were doing 2G. I was working with 2G, and then it became 3G, and then the evolution to 4G. And how I came to found Avanci was really because when I was working in Ericsson, we were doing licensing from Ericsson to another company, and that worked. We signed during my time over 100 agreements with many companies. At the same time, as you know, connectivity was really moving into IoT. Cellular connectivity was really becoming part of the IoT ecosystem. One of it is vehicle, but really other smart meters and others. So I thought about this. It's going to be many more companies that are going to have cellular connectivity in their product, which meant it's really not as efficient to do it one-on-one anymore. It's more efficient to do it where you have many to many. So that's why we created Avanci. It's a platform solution where you have many companies creating the technology and developing the technology, and many, many companies on the other side implementing, using the technology. The idea came both from me thinking about it, but also the OEMs. They asked us, when we were talking to them at Ericsson, they asked us if we could find a solution that is much more collective and much more efficient. And they could just sign one agreement and they get access to the IP in relation to 3G and 4G.
Thank you for describing Avanci to us. And you mentioned a number of times efficiency. Would that be the major driver for something that maybe could be described as a market disruptor?
I would say yes, efficiency is really important. The way I would think about Avanci and what we are providing is it's both efficiency, but also simplicity. Think about it. If you are trying to have a technology into a product, you could be a big company, or it could be a really small company. It doesn't really matter. You're trying to have connectivity to a drone or to a smart meter or to a car or whatever it is. You really want simple. You don't want complicated processes. And so we made it really simple. So you sign with us, it's one agreement. The payment comes to us. We actually solve all the issues with taxes around the world, wherever you are. So it's really for the people who are implementing, using the technology, is really simple. When you sign, the price is the same as the whole time during the lifetime of your agreement, which means that is predictable, and that's easier for the company to manage their cost structure. So yes, I think efficient is one of them. Make it simple and transparent. Hopefully the companies who are using the technologies can continue innovating on top of the technology that is being used by others. And the companies who create the cellular technology to start with, as an example, they get return on investment so they can continue innovating.
It's interesting when you look at standard essential patents within intellectual property. A lot of people will go, whew, it's kind of the most litigious, the most controversial part of intellectual property. Yet you've set up Avanci in that quite contentious, maybe slightly risky space. How would you respond to that?
I'm an engineer, so I like to solve difficult problems. I feel like it's a challenge for me, and of course, all the people around me, all the people who work, to find a solution to complex issues and make it simple. So that's a challenge we like to do. So one of our core values is we are solution driven. At the end of the day, companies who create the technology, they deserve a return on their investment. If they don't, there is a risk that they don't continue innovating. It has to be the right return on the investment. And the companies who are using the technology, the cost cannot be so high that it doesn't work in their business model. So finding the right balance and the right structure is what we do every day.
Thank you for that. I'm going to ask Tim, because Tim has been in the standard essential patent world for a very long time. You probably feel that Avanci is pretty different to anything that you've seen before.
Yeah, that's making it so interesting that Avanci chose a different approach to things. And I think that's really entrepreneurial from you to do that. I think it starts already with the name. You call yourself a platform. We have out there many patent pools, but not many platforms. So Avanci was the first to do that. My understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, one reason you say you're a platform is that you talk to both parties, licensors and licensee, bilaterally. While pools, typically, they have big conferences, they invite all the patent holders. Well, in your case, you don't do that. You're really a platform in the middle. Also, you, for the first time, went to verticals that are not smartphone. Most pools were founded on licensing programs to smartphones, or at least to some devices like DVD players 20 years ago or TVs, while you went straight from the beginning to an unlicensed industry like the automotive, or now IoT use cases that you have with smart meters. So I think that's also interesting that you go to a non-licensed industry and create something new there and disrupt it. What I think is, if you look at the history of patent pools and who founded patent pools, many were founded by the SEP holders, and they even have shares in these patent pools, or the companies themselves had patents and now they set up another program. So here you did that as an entrepreneur. And I think that gives you somehow a different perspective, but also more like a neutral role in the licensing negotiation. So that's my observation of what's different to what other patent pools do that you do at the patent platform.
Tim, obviously your observations are correct, and it's nice to see that someone like you, who has been in this space for a long time and I've seen a lot of things, that your characterization, I would say, are very, very accurate. You're right. We are not a pool. From the regulator's standpoint, you need at least one patent to participate in our platform. That's the way it should work. But you're absolutely right. We are not owned or controlled by any company. We are independent. Now, it is clear from the OEMs, at least, that we are an independent. And we spend, I would say, at least as much time with them as with the licensors. And of course, the proof is that all the 4G participants, OEMs who license the 4G, who has a 5G car, has joined 5G. That shows that we have managed to be a partner to both sides, which is not easy. We talk to companies and we listen to everyone. Doesn't matter if you are a big company, small company. It doesn't matter, if you are a licensee or a licensor. We listen and we try to find a solution. And we always say that a solution is not 100% of what people want. It's a compromise on both sides. It's a compromise even for the licensors within the licensors, because again, it's 60 companies on one side and another 50 or 60 companies on the other side. Finding that sweet spot where everyone is thinking, okay, this is an acceptable solution to me. That's where we are. That's where we want to be.
And even if you say you simplify things, I think that the road to get there is not simple at all, right? Many people at the beginning, I think, thought Avanci probably will not work, right? And many thought, okay, implementers will never do this, will never come up with a price point. But what I think is also really exciting that not many people talk about, one of my papers when I did my PhD on SEPs 2010, 14 years ago, was about who joins pools. That was the paper about. And guess who doesn't join pools? Qualcomm, InterDigital, Ericsson. Now, you convince those companies that never, ever joined pools in the whole company history to join a pool. I think that is also an achievement that people keep forgetting about because these companies have very sophisticated licensing groups themselves. They go out bilaterally and they typically think they can do a much higher return on investment with that. And they were sophisticated in doing that by themselves. I think that's an interesting approach that you said, let us do it for you guys, because that new vertical is a new challenge. And maybe your teams are better equipped to keep chasing the smartphones and the others. And we do that for you. That's, to me, also a big achievement. Thinking about my paper is now obsolete, but you made it happen.
Tim, I think you're right. Your paper wasn't obsolete, and it's not obsolete now either. As you said it very well, it's very hard work. It's very complicated. We don't take a short-term approach. We're very, very long-term. We don't do anything in our solution to have a shortcut because we feel that if we try to do something which is not good long-term, it won't work. Two things to think about. We are just an option. We are not replacing anyone. Companies can continue licensing their own IP. If a licensee or a vertical or a company, whatever it is, if they prefer to do licensing one-on-one bilaterally, I think that's fine. If they choose to do a license from a platform, that's fine. We are just giving them an option. The way I think about it is that we are just another way to get people access to the license. It's not either or. The option is still there. The other thing I would say you need to think about is we don't take anything for granted. We work really hard. So we continue to always think what kind of value we are bringing to the table. What is it we are doing? Why would they work with us? We have to continue to bring value to this licensing space. The day we don't, we will be obsolete. We have to continue to bring value, and we don't take anything for granted. Not at all.
Talking about value and almost how you can make sure that all parties feel that they are getting value and that whole fairness around rate setting. How do you get that balance right?
We feel that the price at the end of the day is what the market decides. It's not one side or one company and is not the other. It's really what the market. When we launch something, as you know, we've launched a number of new programs last year with licensees and licensors and with a price point. And we do that because we feel that the market decides the price. And if there is licensees and licensors are willing to accept that price, that is the price which the market decided. So that's what we do. I mean, we do a lot of analysis behind the scene and say, well, the value of this technology is X to this product and all that. And we obviously have a lot of discussions with both sides, explaining and listening. But at the end of the day, this is a business decision. A lot of people, I feel, they treat the whole licensing as a legal discussion. It's actually a business decision. And any business decision, it doesn't matter which company it is, if they're buying a product from a supplier or if they're selling their price, it's all about what the market decides, the price. And people, I think, sometimes miss the point. This is a business decision, and the market is the one deciding.
Tim, as the economist, does that ring true?
I think there's a lot of truth in it. I'm teaching students, and in the lecture on SEPs and FRAND licensing, fair, reasonable, non-discriminatory licensing, I keep saying the most controversial part is the R, the reasonable price. And FRAND also, I think, is indeed the outcome of two parties that negotiate, and they come up with a price they can both live with. And that is FRAND. That's then fair, reasonable, non-discriminatory, because they both agree to the price. And I can only agree with Kasim. It's a market, right? We have a demand curve, we have a supply curve, and there's an equilibrium as an economist where the price hits. I do think, however, what still helps are sometimes economic studies that would give some information on how much value a technology brings to a product, the patented technology, and other alternatives to that standard, for example. And those kind of market studies I have also seen with Avanci. As an economist, I would always want to see more even in the market to get some understanding and to kind of fuel these negotiations with some facts or some economic thinking behind it, even though that's, of course, complex, derive at a price. And that's my opinion. Not one entity, even a court, should federate, right? How could they know that? How could they have all the information and then set a rate? The best rate is always one that comes out of a negotiation. And that I can only agree with Kasim that this is perfect. And I think the price is also most of the times with pools and platforms, the determination of is that platform or pool program successful? Because only if you hit the price right, SEP owners will join because they think there is some return on my investment. But also implementers would say, well, that's a fair price. I can agree to that. I can live with that. Because everything else a pool or a platform does, a collective licensing initiative, is pretty straightforward, good for the market. It's a one-stop shop. It saves a lot of transaction cost. And for implementers, not to forget, everyone gets the same price. I can ensure level playing field. So I think when you get the price right, you have a perfect system. But that's not easy. I think that's the challenging part, Kasim. And I can see that there's a lot of bilateral meetings that you go through with one party, with the other party, and then come up with what both parties agree to. And one person told me once in FRAND and SEP licensing, if both parties are equally unhappy, you have a balance. You will never get everyone happy, right? If they're equally unhappy, that's the balance. And I think that's probably true. It's never perfect for each party, but it's equally perfect for each party. Maybe that's the special sauce also of Avanci. I don't know.
As I said, we have 60 companies on one side and another 50 or 60 companies on the other. Only one party who's unhappy or happy. I mean, we have a lot of companies and they have to compromise and they have to accept a solution that is not exactly what they want. I would say it's a very important part of what we do. And I think we got a good feel for things where when you do something for a while, you get the right feel when this is the sweet spot and this is what we want to do. We talk to a lot of companies all the time, and we listen to what they have to say. And we continue even after launching a program. It's not finished. I mean, just because we launch a program, just because somebody signed, doesn't mean that it's the end. No, not at all. There's a lot of things that we continue changing in our 4G program, which was launched, 2016. We still make changes and we still make it better and improve.
What does the future hold for Avanci? Where do you see Avanci going next? What are some of the blockers or the difficulties that might be ahead?
Going forward, what we are doing, it's going to be more and more useful because there are more companies creating the technologies and a lot of companies using the technology, and it's all global. So I feel that there are a lot of areas and industries where our solution really, it's a solution that brings simplicity and efficiency to the market. And it's going to just be even more complex, I think. So we are going to continue to be solution-driven, innovative, humble, listen to everybody, and just improve every day. And Avanci means moving forward. So we keep moving forward.
Kasim, can we get your final takeaway for this podcast episode?
So the takeaway from this podcast, I would say that if a solution that you're working on is complex, if you realize that it takes time to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish, my thinking is it means that you have picked a really important task or an important undertaking, and you're trying to create a solution for it. And that's really, at least from my perspective, my experience, has been really rewarding. Once you have the solution, you really feel that you have really accomplished something great.
Great. I think that was a great podcast episode. I think the main thing we learned today from Kasim is that the licensing of so-called standard essential patents is very challenging, especially when you approach new industry verticals that may have never been before exposed to the standard essential patent licensing. I think we also learned that agreement can only be reached when both parties' perspectives are well understood and represented. And I think a neutral party, which can be a patent platform or a patent pool, can ensure a very well-balanced negotiation so that the parties can agree on a reasonable price that on the one hand well compensates the patent holders, but on the other hand also allows the standard implementers to grow and scale their standard compliant products and then innovate on top of that. I think often people still underestimate how challenging it is to please those both sides of the table. And even more as an economist, I think of different effects here. One effect is called the bandwagon effect, where companies would only join a pool or a platform when another company joins. So how do you get a first mover saying, I'll be the first? Or how can you convince a group of companies to go in all together? I think that's super challenging. And I think that's something that Avanci, at some point of time, and it took probably a lot of time, solved very well. The other thing is chicken and egg, because only when you have a significant number of SEP holders, implementers will even listening to you, because you need to represent a certain amount of SEP portfolios so people listen to you and take you seriously. So again, without the patent holders, you don't get the licensees, and we have the chicken and egg. And also here, I think it's interesting of what Kasim said today of how they solved that. And I'm full of respect to open a new program, a new licensing initiative in an industry that is also, we should remember always, well represented by huge lobby groups of both sides of the table. So it's very difficult to get a consensus here from both sides. And I think Kasim and his team really built something that is creative. And I think that was needed in these times where we have complex issues. I'm thinking about, for example, something we haven't even discussed much today, but revenue sharing rules, so that the patent holders are all happy with how the revenue is shared. But also building programs and licensing programs that go across technologies and across standards to simplify it. Also incentive programs. I think that's what Kasim also talked about today. Early movers get a different rate than late movers, and then the rate stays the same. I think that is also something interesting that I know for a fact that some of the patent holders actually never expected that when they started with 6 companies, they became 60, and now they have to share revenue with 59 others. That is something very interesting that maybe got first movers in that agreed on a price that they could keep. So I think it's this entrepreneurship, this out-of-the-box thinking that we need today to solve these SEP licensing problems that we have. And I think, Kasim, I have to say that you are really an inspiring person. Thank you for your time today. Keep up the good work. I'm excited to see Avanci advance even more in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for tuning into the LexisNexis Evolving IP podcast series. Please continue the conversation on social and share your thoughts about today's episode on Avanci, Advancing Licensing.